3 bone-chilling true horror stories that haunt you at 3 a.m. forever. The clock read 3 a.m. The air was thick with an eerie silence, like the world was holding its breath. In that stillness, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, whispering dark secrets from beyond. What kind of terrors could lurk in the corners of our fears at this cursed hour? 3 chilling tales would soon awaken those fears, gripping the hearts of even the bravest souls. The first story came from a small town, where a young girl named Lily roamed the dark woods, always just beyond the safety of her home. The townsfolk spoke of a shadow that followed her, a figure that drifted silently behind her, a phantom no one else could see. Eyes wide with curiosity, Lily would hear strange voices calling her name, luring her deeper and deeper into the gloom. She vanished one fateful night, her laughter lost to the wind. Many claimed they still saw her silhouette flitting through the trees, a ghost forever chasing the freedom she craved. The woods held its breath, expecting her return, but would she come back, or was her fate sealed among the trees? The next tale took us to a dusty old motel that had seen better days. With peeling wallpaper and flickering lights, it was a perfect hideaway for wayward souls, but one room was strictly off-limits. Whispers told of a gruesome history, the kind that keeps you up at night. A family had checked in, never to check out. Their screams echoed through the walls until silence fell, leaving only bloodstains behind. Guests felt a chill as they passed, the sensation of being watched creeping on their backs. Stories of shadowy figures flickered past the windows, leaving trails of dread. It was said that if you listened closely enough, you could hear their desperate cries for help, forever trapped in a night they couldn't escape. Then came the most haunting account, a group of friends who dared to explore an abandoned asylum, a place where madness whispered in every corner. As they delved deeper, the air grew thick with despair. They stumbled upon a room filled with the remnants of tortured souls, torn photographs and rusted restraints. But the most shocking sight was a grim diary left behind, its pages stained red with fear. Each word seemed to pulse with life, recounting the horrors inflicted within those walls. As if summoned, ghastly apparitions began to emerge, pale, twisted faces forming from the shadows, their mouths moving in silent screams. Would these lost souls reveal their secrets, or drag the friends into eternal darkness? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With those haunting tales swirling in their minds, every heartbeat echoed the students' quickening anxiety. They realized they couldn't ignore the call of the unknown, a darkness creeping closer with every moment. What unspeakable terrors awaited them next? The unknown was whispering, and it demanded their attention. Would they dare step closer, risking everything for the sake of understanding? The answers could change everything, but what price would they pay? The atmosphere felt heavy, like a storm was brewing. The students exchanged nervous glances, their breath hitching as they stood on the precipice of something dreadful. The abandoned asylum loomed before them, dark and forbidding. The stories they'd heard rattled inside their skulls like chains, urging them to turn back while they still could. But curiosity, that relentless beast, drove them forward. As they stepped through the creaking gate, the wind howled a warning, but they pressed on. With each step deeper into the asylum, the air thickened. It felt alive, charging with memories of despair and madness. A chill ran down their spines, raising goosebumps and a pit of dread forming in their stomachs. They turned a corner and stumbled into a dimly lit hallway. Rusted metal doors lined either side, each one a muted scream from the past. A sudden bang echoed, making them jump. What was that? Each of them held their breath, the silence swallowing their whispers. Jen, the boldest of the group, pushed forward. Maybe we should check one of the rooms, she suggested, trying to steady her voice. The others looked at her, their faces pale, but it was too late. The urge to go farther had taken root. They shuffled closer behind her, the darkness pulling them in like a sinister magnet. They entered the first room, and an overwhelming smell of decay hit their nostrils. The walls were plastered with faded drawings that looked eerily like faces twisted in agony. It felt as if those long-gone souls were clawing at the walls, begging for release. Their hearts thundered in response, aligning with the haunted space. Suddenly, the room plunged into silence as one of them, Mark, gasped. "Look!" He pointed to the far corner. Once hidden in shadow, a figure emerged. It was fleeting, just a flicker of movement, but it sent a jolt through each of them. A face, pallid and gaunt, slid in and out of sight, a silent wail etched upon its features. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as fear gripped her. "Yeah, but we can't just leave, right?" Jen's bravado wavered as the darkness lengthened around them. Their group had come seeking thrills, yet now the only thrill they felt was raw terror. The walls began to reverberate with whispers, indistinct murmurs growing louder and louder. They could almost make out phrases like, "Help us find us." The voices slithered around them, creating a surreal soundscape that clawed at their sanity. Panic surged, they needed to escape. Just then, a door behind them creaked open. They turned as one, only for it to reveal nothing. Just the yawning abyss of another dark room. Someone in the group began to tremble, knees weak. "Guys, I don't think we should." Mark started, but he was cut off by the shrill echo of their own fear. A scream rang from the hallway. It pierced through their thoughts, a cry that was all too familiar. "Lily!" A voice of a familiar friend screamed. "What's happening?" Jen cried, backing towards the exit. Their fears had come alive, a palpable force. Was this the darkness they had beckoned? Were the ghosts of the past ready to drag them down into a despair as profound as their own fears? Just as the light seemed to flicker and fade, a flash of insight entered their minds. They were not just observers, they were entangled in this twisted reality. They had awakened something that might never let them go. What had they invited into their lives? And as the darkness began to close in, would anyone make it out alive to tell the tale? The air around them thickened, a smothering blanket that tightened with every labored breath. Mark's eyes darted to the door, the sanctuary that felt ever more like a mirage. The echo of Lily's scream pierced the static air, gnawing at their insides like hungry rats. "We have to find her," he shouted, more to himself than anyone else. "Are you kidding? No way." Sarah's voice quivered, her eyes wide and frantic, but Jen's resolve flared, fueled by a mix of dread and stubborn bravery. "We can't just leave her." She gestured towards the hallway, as if it could somehow provide a way forward. The shadows visibly shuddered, and an icy hand gripped their hearts. The longing to flee warred with the instinct to protect. They moved into the hallway, dread like a rising tide. The whispers grew louder, swelling to a crescendo that drowned out their own racing thoughts. Shadows flickered sporadically on the walls, distorting into faces that seemed to leer at them in malevolence. One barely visible form stepped into the periphery of Jen's vision, forcing her to suppress a gasp. "Stick close," Jen said through clenched teeth, her voice breaking. They hurried towards the point where the scream had come from, the fragile bond of solidarity pushing them forward. Another door swung open, and a gust of cold air rippled through, chilling them further. The room lay thick with darkness, almost tangible. With a sudden shove, Jen shouldered the door wide, revealing a space littered with broken furniture and scattered papers, some stained in faded red, evidence of a long-forgotten tragedy. "Lily!" Mark shouted. Silence took him hostage, the echo of his own voice mocking him. As they explored the room, searching desperately, Jen stumbled upon a crumpled piece of paper. The handwriting was barely legible, smeared as if written in desperation. A chill coursed through her as she read the words, "Help us before it's too late." "What does it mean?" Sarah whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows. Before Jen could answer, a shadow flickered across the far wall. They all froze, hearts pounding. Then, like lightning, the shadow coalesced into a figure standing in the corner. Pale, eyes hollow, it seemed to beckon them closer. "Are you Lily?" Mark's voice quivered. The figure tilted its head, revealing a grin that was both haunting and sorrowful. "Help me," it whispered, and suddenly the lights flickered and shut off completely, plunging them into an overwhelming darkness. Panic erupted. "What's happening?" Sarah screamed, hands clawing at the dark. "Back away. Stay together," Jen yelled, grabbing Mark's arm. The air felt electric with a brewing storm of chaos. They clutched at each other, breaths quickening as desperation clawed at their throats. The whispering grew into a chorus of pleads, echoing all around them, swirling into a frenzy that seeped into their minds like poison. Then, without warning, the figure lunged at them with a banshee-like wail. They stumbled backward, fear paralyzing their muscles as the darkness threatened to swallow them whole. In that instant, a blinding flash lit the room, illuminating the figure for what it truly was: an apparition, festering with anguish, trapped between worlds. "Run!" Mark yelled, and that was all the encouragement they needed. Adrenaline flooded their veins. They bolted for the door, fear sprinting just behind them. But as they bolted out of the room and into the hallway, the whispers shifted. Now they were enraged, blaming them for trespassing into their cursed territory. The pounding in their ears became almost deafening as they charged down the corridor. But was it truly the way out? What unseen horrors awaited them at the end of this maze? They rounded another corner and stumbled upon a doorway that stood ajar. A flicker of light drew them closer. But just beyond that threshold lay their next challenge, and maybe something even darker waiting to be unleashed. Would they discover the truth behind the whispers or become yet another ghostly echo in the asylum's cursed halls? The moment they crossed into the next room, they were engulfed in an eerie glow, the flickering light dancing like trapped fireflies in a jar. Mark squinted, heart racing, desperate to see if it was a sign of hope or another trap. The walls were lined with old photographs, their frames covered in layers of dust. Faces stared out with joy and despair frozen in time, and somewhere in that laughter and sorrow, Mark felt a pull, a connection to the forgotten. "Where's the light coming from?" Sarah muttered, worry etched in her voice as she scanned their surroundings, the shadows still stalking them like wolves. "They'll be watching us," Jen warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have to stay focused." But focus was slipping like sand through their fingers. The air thickened again, charged with an unseen energy that made every hair on their bodies stand on end. As they stepped deeper into the room, a soft sound broke through the silence, a childlike giggle. It echoed off the walls, seeming to bounce around them. It was twisted and high-pitched, sending a shiver crawling up Jen's spine. "Did you hear that?" Mark asked, a tremor in his voice. "Yeah, what was that?" Sarah replied, her eyes wide with fear. "Lily," Jen breathed, uncertain but compelled to move forward. "We have to see." They crept further into the room, each step echoing louder than the last. The giggle came again, followed by a whisper that slithered through the air, "Play with us, get back." Mark's instinct kicked in, sensing the danger that lurked. "It's a trap." But the moment he shouted, the giggle morphed into laughter, manic and wild. The lights flickered again violently, plunging them into a strobing chaos of illumination and darkness, and through the erratic flashes, shadowy figures began to materialize. "Run!" Jen cried again, but the words barely left her lips before a sinister figure rushed toward them. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, the grin stretching wide and wide, a grotesque mask of glee in a panic. They turned to flee, but not before noticing the photographs on the walls. The images seemed to shift, faces morphing into expressions of terror, mouths open in silent screams. It was as if the very souls captured in those frames were witnessing the horror unfold before them. "Leave now." The voice boomed, echoing all around, vibrating through the floor beneath them. It was neither male nor female, but a twisted mix of many, blending into one. When they saw her, a small girl standing at the far end of the room, her porcelain features illuminated by the strange light. "You can't leave," she whispered, her tone sweet yet sinister. "Not while they play." "Who?" Mark asked, bewildered. He was rooted to the spot, his gut telling him to run but his heart drawn to her. But as the shadows crept closer, weaving through the room like dark smoke, the girl began to fade. "Help us," she cried, her voice echoing as everything shifted around them again. "You have to help us, N.O." Jen screamed, reaching toward her. "Don't go. We'll find you." The light vanished, plunging them back into suffocating darkness. Silence engulfed them, thick enough to choke on. Each of them grasped their phones, the only source of light they had left. The weak beams flickered, barely enough to chase off the encroaching shadows. "Lily, we have to find Lily!" Mark shouted, desperate, his resolve firming once more. As they fumbled through the blackness, shapes began to coalesce at the edges of their vision, twisted figures bearing angry faces, including the features of the girl they'd just seen. "What did we get ourselves into?" Sarah whispered, panic rising again as another childlike giggle erupted, reverberating off the walls. "Keep moving," Jen urged, leading the way, but with every step they took, the shadows deepened and the air chilled, suffocating their hope. They huddled closer, the door they had entered now closing behind, a heavy groan indicating it was almost completely sealed. What awaited them next? Another brief glimpse of help or a plunge deeper into horror? Every ounce of instinct told them they were being hunted. Would they find the truth behind the girl's plea, or would their chance at escape slip through their fingers like everything else had? "Keep going," Jen's voice shouted over the laughter surrounding them. But just ahead, at what might be their last turn, a new voice emerged, cold and commanding. "You're not alone." They stood frozen, staring into the abyss that seemed to stretch on forever, wondering who or what awaited them on the other side. The oppressive darkness felt alive, pulsating with a life of its own as the voice faded. Mark swallowed hard, his throat dry, fear electrifying the air around him. "What does that mean?" he muttered, but no one had the answer. Their breaths came rapid and shallow, the echo of their panic reverberating against the walls. "Is there another door?" Sarah gasped, scanning the edges of their confined space, her phone light flickering, casting desperate shadows. "Not that I can see," Jen replied, her jaw clenched. "We need to keep moving forward." But the moment they shifted, the childish giggle returned, echoing with an edge of mockery. "Play with us forever." It twisted their insides, a plea draped in menace. The laughter wrapped around them like chains. "Stop it!" Mark shouted, wishing he could shield his friends from the taunting but knowing they had to act. "We can't give in. It's trying to trap us." They pressed on, compelled by fear more than hope. Each step drew them closer to the unknown, the shadows dancing menacingly, shaping into forms that flickered just out of reach. The faint glow of Jen's phone illuminated a corner ahead, a doorway, half hidden behind a wall of jagged, peeling wallpaper. Heart pounding, Jen reached for the handle. "This might be our only chance." Just then, a cacophony of giggles erupted, loud and chaotic, flooding the air with a sense of impending doom. "Don't go. Stay, play, go. Now!" Mark urged, adrenaline coursing through him. They barreled through the doorway, tumbling into the next room, stealing glances over their shoulders. The high-pitched laughter faded but left a lingering sense of dread. This room was smaller, and the glow was peculiarly brighter, illuminating scenes of unhinged fantasy, giant dolls with cracked porcelain faces, their eyes punctuated with age and sadness. Broken toys littered the floor, each one appearing as if it had stories to tell. "God, where are we?" Sarah breathed, echoing Mark's own confusion. "Some sort of playroom," Jen replied, her hand trembling as she swept the light over the scattered remnants of childhood. But something was off. An underlying feeling whispered that these toys were more sinister than innocent. Suddenly, a doll's head spun to face them, its eyes dark voids. "Come play," it said, its voice eerily sweet yet laced with malice. Mark's breath hitched in his throat. Not a chance. With renewed urgency, they began to inspect the room. In an old toy chest, Mark noticed something shimmering beneath a pile of discarded dolls. He pushed aside the plastic limbs and uncovered a small, dusty music box. "Look at this," he said, holding it up. The ornate carvings hinted at a forgotten time. "Could be something important." Jen stepped closer. "Be careful. It could be cursed or it could be a way out," Mark interrupted, a mix of hope and fear mixing in his chest. He wound the key and, to their shock, a haunting melody filled the air, swirling around them, pulling strings at the edges of their sanity. Just then, their surroundings shifted. The room began to warp, the toys vibrating, the walls melting away like wax under flame. The contours of the space blurred, and the shadows writhed as the laughter crescendoed. "Hold on!" Jen screamed, grabbing Sarah and Mark's arms. But it was too late. The music box's melody transformed, turning into a twisted lullaby, sinister and seductive, promising release from the terror. Sarah gasped, eyes wide. "It's bringing them back." The very air thickened with their sweet whispers of play and laughter. Figures began to materialize. Pale children with hollow eyes emerged from the shadows, faces contorted into expressions of both joy and wrath. They swirled around, encircling the trio. "Your turn," one of the ghostly figures sang, stepping closer, its hands outstretched. Mark clenched his fists, panic gripping his chest. "No, no, no. We want to play." But those words seemed futile. The very essence of the once serene music tugged at their souls. Would they willingly join this nightmarish game? Did they truly have a choice? At that moment, a sudden darkness swallowed the light, the music fading away, leaving behind a chilling silence. Then, from the shadowy depths, the cold voice resonated again, more menacing than before. "You will play." Who would bow to the darkness? Would they unravel the truth behind the forces at play, or become another piece in this twisted game of shadows? The question lingered in the air as their fate hung, teetering on the edge of despair. The enveloping silence felt heavy, a suffocating blanket wrapped tightly around them. Mark's heart raced, an erratic drumbeat thundering in his ears. The cold voice echoed in his mind, its promise laced with dread. "You will play." It was a chilling declaration, one that fractured his resolve. "Guys, we need to think." Sarah's voice quivered, slicing through the stillness. "We can't just stand here." On the fringes of her panic, a shimmering shape began to form in the darkness. The spectral children drifted nearer, their hollow eyes wide with anticipation. Were they friends or foes? Mark felt an instinctive urge to flee, but terror bound him in place. Jen's breath came quickly, shoulders rising and falling like a fragile bird trapped in a storm. What if they want the music box? Mark gritted his teeth, glancing down at the object in his hand, the glint of its surface now dull and grim. What had he awakened? "We can't just give it to them. We don't know what it does." In that moment, the children halted, their faces flat and longing. "Play with us," they chorused, voices like silk brushing against steel. It sent a shiver coursing through Mark's spine, and he steeled himself. The clamor of their fears twisted into one awful realization: the music held power that could bind them to this horror forever. "I have an idea." Sarah suddenly blurted out. "What if we turn it off? Maybe it's controlling them." A flicker of hope sparked in Mark's chest. "That might work. But how do we stop it?" "Smash it," Jen suggested, gesturing passionately with wild eyes. "We have to break it. Now." The specters shifted, a collective gasp thinly layered over their blank expressions, a sudden flicker of anger igniting their countenance. "No!" they wailed, their voices merging into a distorted cacophony. "Do it. Mark shouted, adrenaline surging through him. With trembling hands, Jen stepped forward and yanked the music box from Mark's grasp. "Get ready." As she raised it, the ghostly figures recoiled, their movements sharp and frantic. Mark's heart leaped into his throat, the urge to run colliding with the instinct to hold his ground. "Hurry, Jen." She swung her arm back, gathering momentum, and then brought it down with vicious force against the hard floor. The music box shattered. The haunting melody screeched to a halt, replaced by a deafening silence that echoed into the void. The air around them grew viscous, the atmosphere thick enough to choke. The children gasped, their forms flickering as shards of broken porcelain burst forth, carving the air like icy shards. "No! You will pay!" A sudden fury erupted, a tempest of wrath that swept through the room. One of the children, a small girl with stark, white hair, lunged at Jen, shrieking like a banshee. Mark leaped forward, shoving Jen out of the way. The tiny specter sailed past, crashing into a wall and dissolving into the shadows. "Run!" Mark yelled, eyes wide, as the rest of the spirits exploded into motion. "We need to get out of here." They darted toward the door, the sound of tiny, furious screeches echoing behind them, clawing through the nightmarish darkness. But the doorway began to close, the peeling wallpaper curling in as though alive, attempting to trap them once more. "Mark!" Sarah screamed as she stumbled. "Don't leave me behind." He turned, heart pounding like a war drum. "Grab her!" he shouted at Jen. They moved as one, desperation fueling their speed. Each moment stretched like a rubber band, the air thick with impending doom, sweat pouring down their backs. With one final push, they crashed against the door just as it slammed shut behind them. They tumbled out into a hallway, gasping and wheezing, the echoes of laughter still ringing in their ears. But the relief was short-lived. The air shifted, a thickening miasma wrapping around them with a suffocating embrace. "Playtime is far from over," the childish voice cooed from somewhere close behind, sending icy fingers of fear crawling up Mark's spine. Had they really escaped? Or was this only a cruel trick of the darkness? What awaited them down this new path? The question hung ominously in the air, twisted by the promise of more horrors lurking in the shadows. A narrow beam of light sliced through the thick haze in the hallway, illuminating their frantic faces. Mark's hands trembled as he pulled Sarah and Jen into a tight huddle, trying to get their bearings. "What now?" he whispered, eyes darting around for any sign of safety. He could still hear the echo of the children's laughter, a lingering reminder that the danger was far from over. Sarah's breath came in quick bursts. "That voice, it was so close," she murmured, her brow furrowing as fear squeezed her chest. "What does it mean by playtime?" "I don't know," Mark replied, his throat dry. "But we need to keep moving. Whatever we do, we can't let them catch us." At his words, a shiver rippled through the air, a low hum that made their skin prickle. The sensation twisted into a menacing whisper, growing louder as if a storm were brewing in the dark. The figures of the children were unnatural, flickering like bad reception on a TV screen. They were closer now, caught somewhere between this world and the next, their movements jerky and unnerving. "What if we find another way out?" Jen stammered, desperately scanning the walls. "There must be a window or something." Mark nodded but didn't speak. He pushed forward, guided by an instinct deeper than terror. They needed to escape, and quickly. As they crept along the dim corridor, old portraits lining the walls seemed to watch them, eyes following their every move. Suddenly, a low thud echoed behind them. A sound like a small fist pounding on a door. "They're coming!" Mark hissed, adrenaline flooding his veins as he turned sharply, urging the others to move faster. But there were no windows, no doors. Just an endless stretch of wallpaper peeling away like the layers of their sanity. Panic flared within Sarah, her foot caught on a threadbare carpet, sending her sprawling. "Sarah!" Mark shouted, spinning back. She crumbled against the floor, her breath caught in her throat. The thuds behind them morphing into a twisted chorus of shrieks. The children's spectral forms began to materialize from the shadows, gliding closer with their hollow, yearning eyes. "Go! I'll help her!" Jen yelled, pulling Sarah back to her feet. "No, we need to stay together." Mark shot back, his chest tightening. As they stood, paralyzed by fear, the walls of the hallway pulsated, alive with the children's anger. The painted eyes of the portrait seemed to widen, their mouths stretching into silent screams as the temperature dropped. "Play with us," the chorus echoed again, but now the voices carried a sinister undertone, rage building in waves. In a moment of sheer desperation, Mark reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the remnants of the shattered music box. He could still feel the remnants of its energy humming in his hand. Maybe, just maybe, this could save them. "What are you doing?" Jen yelled, as the first phantom child lunged, a ghastly grin on its face. The moment paused, hanging heavy like a storm cloud ready to burst. "Distract them," Mark commanded, gripping the shards tightly. "I'll throw this." With no time to explain, Jen and Sarah took a breath, positioning themselves as they gathered what little strength remained. Mark hurled the shards, watching as they scattered across the floor, sending the children into a frenzy. "Now! Run!" They bolted, charging ahead, breathless and wild, as the anguished cries followed them, claws at their heels. The sound of laughter turned shrill, it was a twisted symphony of dread. As they rounded a corner, Mark spotted light ahead, faint, golden and inviting. "There! Into the light!" He pushed them onward, praying it wasn't an illusion. But the air thickened again, whispers melding into a roar. The once distant echoes now surged forward, racing alongside them, pulling them towards some unseen fate. "Wait!" Sarah screamed, halting abruptly. "What if we can't go through it? What if it's a trap?" Mark felt his heart plummet. There's no choice. But even as he urged them forward, an icy dread anchored him in place. What lay beyond that light? Would it be salvation or the final snare of the children's game? The pounding of footsteps loomed closer, and Mark felt a surging wave of urgency. "We have to decide, stay or run." Panic tightened its grip on him, but in that moment of decision, he knew only one thing. Whatever awaited them on the other side held the key to their survival or their end. Could they truly escape the playtime that had begun? Or would they be trapped in eternal darkness? Mark's heart raced, pounding against his ribs like a frantic drum. He looked at Sarah and Jen, their terrified faces illuminated by the faint glow ahead. The whispers swirled around them, desperate and pleading, morphing into an urgent chant. "Play with us, stay with us." With a deep breath, he pushed aside his doubts. "We need to go now." He didn't wait for their response. Mark lunged toward the light, pulling the others along. As they crossed the threshold into the golden light, it enveloped them, warm and inviting. For a fleeting moment, hope sparked within Mark. Was this their way out? But as soon as they stepped through, the warmth turned icy, slipping through his fingers like sand. The light flickered, and the space around them twisted into a warped, grotesque version of the corridor they just escaped. The walls pulsated with shadows, dark hands reaching out as if trying to drag them back. Where are we?" Jen stuttered, her voice strangled with fear. Mark scanned their surroundings. They were still trapped, but now they faced a room filled with old, dusty toys, clocks with no hands, dolls with cracked porcelain faces, and an ancient merry-go-round that creaked as though driven by a spectral wind. The air smelled of musty decay, an unsettling contrast to the brightness that had lured them in. The laughter returned, loud and mocking. Mark's stomach twisted as he recognized the chilling quality of the sound. It was no longer just children's laughter, it morphed into something sinister, something that had teeth. "Welcome to our playroom," a voice echoed, dripping with malice. "Run!" Mark shouted, shoving Sarah forward as he shoved Jen ahead. They darted toward the exit, but a chorus of low giggles stopped them cold. The ghostly figures of the children materialized again, blocking their escape, eyes filled with that unnatural hunger. "Playtime isn't over." One of them screeched, their voice sounding almost like the twist of a rusty hinge. They began to move closer, their forms glitching in and out of focus, faces contorting into painful grins. In a panic, Mark spun to the room's center. "We can't fight them, there has to be a way out." Panic surged, rippling through him like electricity. "There has to be something here. Over there." Sarah pointed to a giant, ornate toy chest at the far end of the room. It appeared out of place, untouched by dust and time, shimmering with an odd light. Mark propelled them towards it, each step feeling like wading through thick mud. With every inch, the joyless laughter grew louder, creeping under their skin, rooting them in place as they neared it. "What if it's another trap?" Jen gasped, pulling back slightly. "Do we have another choice?" Mark snapped, frustration boiling over as he reached for the chest. He wrenched it open, hoping for some semblance of salvation. Inside, a cacophony of old toys spilled out, but one item gleamed amongst the chaos, a radiant, hand-carved jigsaw piece, glimmering as if it held every color at once. Mark grasped it and felt a pulse, a connection aligning with the core of his being. Suddenly, a scream erupted from behind, chilling him to his bones. The children charged forward, faces twisting into grotesque masks of rage. "You took our fun." Their wails rattled the walls. Time stretched, the world narrowing around Mark as he faced the horrors rising to take him. "Whatever this is, it must be important," he shouted, half to himself. "We can use it." Just as he raised the piece, the room trembled, shadows gathering like a storm cloud. The laughter transformed into a blood-curdling roar. They were losing time. Together. Mark yelled, gripping the jigsaw piece tightly as he turned back to Sarah and Jen. "We need to make a plan. Or we will be part of their game forever." But behind him, something flickered in the shadows, a larger form looming, bigger than the ghostly children. "Playtime is just beginning," it whispered, and the world around them started to spin violently. The light dimmed and darkened, and Mark felt hope slip through his fingers again. What if the piece could save them? Or had they crossed a line they could never return from? Each held a secret that could lead to salvation or doom, but with darkness closing in, would they dare to unlock the mysteries of the playroom? As the laughter crescendoed, Mark knew they had to make a choice, and fast. The clock was ticking on their playtime. The ground shook beneath them, a violent tremble that set the room into a chaotic dance of dolls and dust. Mark's grip tightened around the jigsaw piece as fear coursed through him like electricity. The shadows writhed and twisted, their forms stretching beyond comprehension. The once whimsical laughter melted into a disturbing chorus, echoing the chaos that surrounded them. "Mark, what are we supposed to do?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, panic lacing her words. Her eyes darted around, watching the ghostly figures inch closer. Each breath she took was shallow, as if the very air were a barrier she couldn't breach. "Whatever this is," Mark forced out, "it's got to mean something." He felt the warmth of the jigsaw piece pulse against his palm, almost as if it had a heartbeat of its own. "Maybe it's the key to all of this." "Are you insane?" Jen's voice cracked, glancing nervously at the children closing in on them. "That thing could be what trapped us here in the first place." But Mark needed an answer. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and shouted into the dark, "What do you want from us?" His voice echoed, bouncing off the warped walls, but the children merely giggled, their faces contorting into ghoulish masks of delight at his fear. "Play!" They screeched in unison, their voices like nails on a chalkboard, resonating deep in his bones. "Playtime forever. Join us." The shadows thickened, their outlines merging into larger forms, figures of adults, seemingly trapped in the same twisted cycle. Mark caught glimpses of their tortured expressions, frozen in horror. What were they? Were they just like him? Had they tried to resist the call and paid the price, he felt a wave of desperation wash over him. "We can't be part of this twisted game," he yelled, shaking his head furiously. "We have lives to return to." Lives? The taller figure stepped forward, towering above the ghostly children. Its features shifted like smoke, forming a face that mirrored his own. "You think you have a choice? You're already playing." As the realization sunk in, the room began to swirl. The laughter crescendoed, becoming an unbearable symphony of doom. Mark could feel his resolve shatter, and in that moment of fear, he raised the jigsaw piece, holding it high. "Whatever you are," he shouted, "we're taking control. We refuse to live in your nightmare." The shadows recoiled, and the laughter turned into shrieks of outrage. A wind howled through the room as if the very essence of their rage wanted to snuff him out. The jigsaw piece glimmered brightly, igniting with a light that rivaled the sun itself. "Mark, what are you doing?" Sarah screamed, her hands reaching for him as if to pull him back from the brink. "It's light against their darkness," he cried back, not fully sure who he was convincing, her or himself. "We have to harness it." Then, in a surge of courage, Mark pressed the jigsaw piece against the floor, feeling a pulse that synchronized with the beat of his heart. The shadows hesitated, shrinking back as the light swallowed the space around them. "Make it stop," Jen pleaded. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her fear palpable. "Together," Mark yelled again, drawing the girls to him. "If this is our only chance, we have to push through together." The jigsaw piece shone with nearly blinding intensity, the light so bright it cast everything else into stark darkness. The laughter fell silent as the figure lurched back, recognizing that their hold was slipping. Mark's determination exploded within him. If they were to escape this nightmare, they had to give everything. They had to believe together. As the shadows darkened, gripping at his mind, he felt a whisper within, urging him forward. The light began to envelop them, breaking through the darkness like a raging tide, but as the elusive piece shone brighter, illuminating the entire room, Mark suddenly saw the distinct silhouettes of more shadows materializing just beyond the door, a larger, hulking form that loomed in the darkness. "Playtime never ends," it growled, slinking closer as the piercing laughter returned with a twist. Mark felt a cold sweat run down his spine as he faced the impending storm. Would their bond within that moment be enough to stave off the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole? Or would the twisted pull of the shadows drag them back, deeper into the playroom's abyss? They had unknowingly awakened a force far more sinister than they could ever imagine. Time was running out. Who would take the final leap into the unknown? The air crackled with tension, the shadows seething around them like thunderclouds before a storm. Mark felt the pounding of his heart in his ears, drowning out the echoing laughter of those lost souls. The light from the jigsaw piece pulsed warmly in his hand, a beacon of hope against a backdrop of despair. It was now or never. Together, we can drive them back, Mark shouted, rallying his friends closer. He felt both fear and determination surge within him, a fragile yet unbreakable bond forming as they stood side by side, palms pressed together as the light flickered and flared. The laughter transformed, now mocking, the children intertwining between worlds, their faces twisting into grotesque versions of joy. "Join us. Forever," they screamed, the sound tearing through Mark's resolve, threatening to rip away all sense of hope. "No!" he cried, channeling all the strength he could muster into the piece. With a deep breath, he plunged it into the ground, feeling a surge of energy radiate outward. Light exploded from the jigsaw piece, illuminating the chamber, pushing back against the darkness bit by bit. As the shadows recoiled, the figures of spectral children flickered and writhed in the light, their forms shifting erratically, a mixture of pain and fury. They were trapped, bound to this cursed realm, and they wanted company. "You will play. You cannot escape," Mark and his friends called out loudly, a collective chant rising above the clamor. "We refuse to play. We are not yours." Their voices united, breaking through the cacophony of despair. The jigsaw piece blazed, spinning rapidly, its light casting a protective barrier around them. The horrible laughter faded to whimpers, and the children's forms began to dissolve into wisps of smoke. Hope surged within Mark. Could they really escape this nightmare? But then, from the very depths of the shadows, a towering figure emerged, a monstrous form, draped in darkness, hulking and twisted. "You think you can resist?" Its voice boomed, deep and resonant, echoing like the last strikes of a bell tolling finality. Mark felt dread seep into his bones, but he stood tall, raising the jigsaw piece higher, channeling all the light and emotion he could muster. "We are not afraid of you," he shouted defiantly. "You have no hold over us." The giant wavered, as if caught between realms, shadows swirling like a tempest around it. Mark glanced at Sarah and Jen. They were both shaking but resolute, eyes fierce, matching his courage. He met their gazes, and they felt the silent agreement wash over them. This was their moment. With one last effort, they shouted together, "Leave us." The jigsaw piece ignited with a blinding flash, filling the room with searing light. The shadows screamed, a twisted cacophony that sent chills racing down Mark's spine, but he held on to the blinding brightness. It surged around them like a tidal wave, swallowing the darkness whole, pushing and pulling until silence. As it faded, Mark looked around. They stood at the edge of the long hallway, the oppressive weight of the asylum lifted as daylight streamed through. The shadows retreated into the recesses of the building, shrieking and howling as they vanished. "Did we do it?" Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I think we actually got out," Jen exclaimed, relief pouring over her like a gentle rain after a long storm. They met each other's eyes, joy and disbelief in that shared moment, painting smiles across their faces. But as they turned to leave, a soft voice lingered in the air. "You can't escape, playtime never really ends." Mark's stomach dropped. That voice, echoing their past horror, whispered through the now familiar dark. They didn't look back, fear dissipating into adrenaline as they raced toward freedom. Each step away from the asylum pulled them closer to safety and into a place where shadows couldn't touch them. Outside, they collapsed onto the grass, breathless and trembling, filling their lungs with fresh air. "I thought we were done for," Jen gasped, her face pale but alive with relief. Mark lay back, staring into the sky, a tapestry of blue newly washed by the dawn. "We survived," he whispered, his heart still pounding, memories of horror beginning to fade like a vivid dream. Together they breathed, hearts still racing as they embraced the clear, safe world around them, a stark contrast to what they had just faced. They knew the scars would linger, but they had conquered their fears, if only for now. For the first time in what felt like forever, they allowed themselves to be hopeful. The darkness was gone, and with it, the playtime might finally be over. As the sunlight bathed their faces, they could feel the shadows retreating, lost forever, or merely waiting for another chance at that fragile moment of peace. They made a pact. No more running, no more hiding. They were alive, standing together against whatever faced them next, and the world outside awaited. Now, friends, if you've enjoyed this pulse-pounding conclusion, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your engagement truly matters, and the excitement only builds from here. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. What did you think? What's next for our heroes? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let us keep the thrill alive together.